Hello, entrepreneurs. Welcome to another episode of Entrepreneur Fundamentals. My name is Robert Bitto. Today we're going to talk a little bit about landlords. Yes, if you own your own business, especially at the beginning, you're most likely going to be renting space. In America 2016, it is almost impossible for a small business to buy their own commercial location, especially if you're in a big city. I'll give you an example. When I owned my retail stores in Phoenix, I actually looked around to buy a building. And this was before the big housing crisis where housing prices spiked and then they went down again. I was looking for a building, and the cheapest building that I could find was $500,000. Okay, so, before the housing crisis, there was the 0% down and all that stuff, but it didn't apply to commercial buildings. Commercial buildings always have this general rule of 25% down. So on a $500,000 building that wasn't in a very good location, I would have to put $125,000 down in cash on this building. And like I said, it was not in a very good building. Other buildings in better locations, if they were up for sale, they were more in the $800,000 range. And that was Phoenix. Phoenix, of course, is a big city, but the whole reason why Phoenix exists is because land was cheap there. And that the building boom, you can just keep on going out into the desert. It's not like here in San Diego where land is very limited. But here, forget it. I don't even think about owning a commercial place. My warehouse and my office, I just rent, and that's it. And actually, the rent here is not that bad because I am away from the main city of San Diego. I'm located in La Mesa. But enough of my little personal stories here. You are going to have a decent relationship with this landlord. If something goes wrong, you're going to have to call on the landlord to help you. Now, you have a contract. It's called a lease. And if you happen to be in a place where you go month to month, you'll have a rental agreement. And that spells out your obligations and the obligations of the landlord. I've rented so many places in the 17 years that I've been in business, from full-fledged retail stores in strip malls to storage places to warehouses to offices. I've done everything. And I've noticed some things about landlords, and from talking to other business people too. What I've found out is the best landlord to have is somebody who doesn't even live in your same city. And that might seem counterintuitive, because if you need something, somebody in another city, how do they respond? Well, they usually have a management company help. So let's say if something happens here in my office warehouse, I can just call the woman named Teresa, who is in charge of coordinating maintenance issues and stuff. I had a leak once when it rained here, and she was right on top of it, and she had somebody out here and whatever, and boom, 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 it was done. And that's an advantage to renting too. You don't have to pay for that sort of stuff. And then you have your insurance cover the damage if something does happen like that. But the landlord who doesn't live in town is the best landlord, because the one who lives in town, I've found they show up, they, talk to you, they do all of this stuff, and I don't know, I'd rather not deal with them, because usually they're, I don't know, I hate to say this, but landlords are usually not that nice, especially the ones that own commercial property. And they have empires. Those are the worst, where they own 20 properties and you're one of the properties. I had one guy I rented a storefront from in a strip mall, and he told me within the first half hour of meeting him or whatever, he said, "Some people are workaholics. I'm a moneyaholic." Fine. Okay, that should have been a red flag, and it was a red flag, but I really wanted that space. And I was there for about 5 years, and it played out the way I expected. The guy was a jerk. The lease was 53 pages long and had all of these little details in it and everything. But I wanted that space, so I had to dance with the devil. I had another landlord who owned a couple of properties too and was like that and lived in the same city. And he was always stopping by. And it was annoying. One time he stopped by when I was having a festival in my store, and the store was packed with customers. It was something very unusual. And he looked around and he said, "Wow, you're doing pretty well here. I think I want a bigger piece of this." What? He said, "I think maybe I want a bigger piece of this because you're doing so well. I think next time we negotiate the lease, I'm going to raise your rent." Oh, okay. So I work hard, and that means he needs a bigger cut, right, of what I'm making. And I said, "How does that work exactly?" I said, "Why would you do something like that to me? I've been a good tenant." And then he said, "Because I can." And then he said, "Isn't America great?" Well, yeah, I agree America's great, but I mean, that doesn't show America's greatness. I think that shows some of the bad parts of America or some people in it. But I'm not going to talk a lot about these little stories. They're fun to talk about or whatever, and they're illustrative of landlord situations. But you do have a contract with these people. A lot of these landlords think that they're in some power position, and they're not. The contract makes you equals. It makes you, and a lot of people don't see that. They're used to the landlord, being some sort of a dictator, and don't upset the landlord, you might get evicted. That, I think, is a holdover from renting apartments and things like that. But always know that the landlord doesn't have the upper hand. And in a state like California, the laws are more on the side of the tenant. I mean, one of the only times in business where I've seen the government actually be on my side more than someone else's side or their own side. But legally, you are equal. And don't forget that. If a landlord tries to push you around or doesn't honor their end of the contract, there's always small claims court, too, if you have to deal with issues. But it's really interesting. A lease doesn't even really guarantee anything for the landlord. When I was considering leaving my second store, the landlord, who was really chatty and stuff, came by and he goes, "Well, if you don't renew, that's fine." And he said, "Hell, if you leave before the contract's over with, there's really nothing I can do about it. I don't ever go after people who break leases with me. They're usually deadbeats, and it's not worth my time or attorney's fees or going to court or anything." And he said, it really is, the power is really in the person who has the power in the relationship for leaving is really the tenant. Although it is the landlord's option to come after you if you do break a lease, most of them don't, from what I've heard and what I've seen. So another thing to keep in mind, if you happen to get backed up against a corner and then the landlord won't negotiate with you, and you're going to go bankrupt or something like that, you can always back out of the lease. I mean, it's not morally the right thing to do, but if you have to do it, you have to do it. And that's all I have to say on this subject. Thank you once again for your attention, and remember to always work hard, and may all of your entrepreneurial dreams come true.